Well, let's drill down further into these inflation numbers with Phil O'Donoghue, the chief economist with Deutsche Bank here in Australia. Phil, many thanks for your time. The markets took these numbers as a bit of a surprise. There's no surprise, however, that the inflation number over time is going to come down.
Yeah, look, that's right. Ross, we know that the Reserve Bank was looking for inflation to peak in Q4 of last year, and I think this data point certainly adds to that case. It looks like inflation is softening. That's good news, but still very, very high, 6.8%. The target, of course, is 2 to 3. So a long way from being comfortable, but at least we're not seeing inflation pressures accelerate.
And this is really part of the dilemma that the Reserve Bank faces. It makes an interest rate meeting next week decision. And of course, now the markets are saying, well, they've got the chance to pause and to wait and see. Is that your view about this?
Yeah, yes, it is. Look, I think we will get a pause at the April meeting. We've had a bunch of data points over the last little while, which certainly don't make the case for another hike. So I think we'll see a pause next week. I'm not convinced that will be the last. I think the RBA will still need to do some hikes when we get some more data towards the middle of the year. But right here, right now, good news. I think we'll get a pause at the April meeting.
We can see there the peak in this monthly inflation series was certainly out there in December, now easing back out. We look at some of these areas where annual inflation is still much higher than that target band of 2 to 3%. Electricity is the standout, 17.2%. Even holiday travel, though it's coming off. Fuel prices are coming down, but as we said earlier, it's stubbornly high in many parts of the country. But of course, unless it's coming down, it doesn't add to deflation. Are there areas here where you can see over the next 12 months there are big price falls potentially that will take the pressure off inflation?
Yeah, look, I think actually that housing series is looking pretty encouraging. Rents are still very, very strong, but in February we saw a little bit of evidence that maybe we're starting to peak out on that rental inflation. That is a big part of the CPI. It's obviously a lot of focus, particularly young households, people that are trying to rent. So maybe we're seeing a little bit of softening there. That's helpful. But, there are other areas where we're also seeing strength. Things like insurance and financial services accelerated in the month of February. So as always the case, there's a bit of swings and roundabouts in the details. But certainly it is looking like Q4 was the peak. We're starting to see a little bit of softening coming through.
OK, so last year, the fourth quarter was the peak. It's coming down, but the Reserve Bank has a target band currently. We see the Reserve Bank review coming out this week. That's at 2 to 3%. Now, the problem is if inflation bottoms out at 4.5%, it's still not 2 to 3%. Then you've got a dilemma. The Reserve Bank still has a dilemma that interest rates have to stay higher for longer. That's something that the Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe has talked about before.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think we're yet to see just where we're going to land here. We're certainly coming off, and that's encouraging. But where are we going to be in 6 months, 12 months' time? And as you say, if inflation is still above that target, that's going to be problematic for the Reserve Bank. And for mine, the reason for that is because it's going to start to put increasing pressure on wages. If the longer that cost of living pressures remain elevated, the more likely it is that we're going to get a wage price spiral, that wages are going to start to increase. So far, so good on the wages front. But that won't be the case if in 12 months' time we still have inflation well above target. So that's the conundrum for the RBA. Right here, right now, I think, as I said, I think we're going to see more rate hikes, maybe not next week. But if inflation doesn't come down, the prospect of rate cuts is equally less likely, unfortunately.
OK, so you go to wages, and that's interesting to contemplate that, because you're right. All of the wages data that's come out today shows it hasn't jumped with the inflation rate. But then you start to see the Industrial Relations Minister, Tony Burke, saying the government will recommend a full inflation increase in wages on the minimum wage when the Fair Work Commission makes its decision. That's the type of thing that starts to feed in to a wages spiral, even if inflation is starting to fall.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that is the tension. That is the difficulty we're facing in terms of managing these cost of living pressures. How to get that balance right between not adding to inflation, but then also ensuring that workers aren't getting hit too excessively by cost of living pressures. Where that lands is still a little bit of uncertainty. I don't think we can just rest on the fact that through 2022 wage pressure was soft. I think, there's a chance that it starts to accelerate for the reasons you suggest. I think we need to watch outcomes over the remainder of 2023 in particular. And if it's looking uncomfortable for the Reserve Bank, we know what they'll do. They're going to hike rates.
Okay, so you say no rate rise in April. How many more have you got in your model right now?
Look, I've still got 2, Ross. I think we'll get another one in May. And then after the Q1 CPI, so this was the monthly number for February, we'll still see what we get for the full quarter. Another hike in May and then another one in August. So 2 more hikes. I've got the terminal rate at 4.1.
There you go. Phil O'Donoghue, always great to chat to you. Many thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Ross.